Welcome. This is Kelly Rach, your warrior dietitian who fights with you and for you to break free of food, body, and weight obsessions. And we are here this week celebrating the grand opening of Embrace Eating Recovery nutrition services for those struggling to end chronic dieting and to recover from eating disorders. And we're aligning this week with the NEDA Awareness Week, and their theme this year is Come As You Are. And so I've invited several guests to come and speak with me. And today I have a very special guest, and that's Michelle May, author of Eat What You Love and Love What You Eat. And Michelle, I am so grateful to have you here with me today. And I know this is a really personal topic for you. You've been involved in mindful eating and binge eating work for a long time, but it really shares a personal journey for you. And I just would love for you to share that journey with the audience today.
Oh, I'd love to, Kelly, and congratulations on the opening. I think this is really exciting.
Thank you.
You know, I started yo-yo dieting when I was in my early teens. I had body image struggles like many young women do, unfortunately, in our culture. And somehow I had this belief that if I could just find the right diet and have enough willpower to stick to it indefinitely, that I would finally find the happiness and deserve to live the life that I wanted. I think that's a lie that many people buy into in our culture. And sadly, I think it often results in yo-yo dieting and weight cycling and disordered eating and eating disorders, and on many different levels on a misdirection of our energy. I think many, particularly women, but it certainly affects men as well. I think many of us end up spending a lot of time thinking about what we should eat, what we can't eat, what we are going to eat as soon as we get off this stupid diet, you know, thinking about exercise as burning calories instead of health and energy and fun. And I think that really what's happened in our culture is really a sad state of affairs where we've turned eating and exercise into a giant math problem, and we've forgotten that the purpose of eating is to fuel living. So as you said, I experienced that myself for many years. I yo-yo dieted and had disordered eating and even an eating disorder, although it was never diagnosed, all the way through high school and college and into medical school and into my private medical practice, where I heard many people share similar stories. And I think that was one thing for me that really helped hit this home, was that many people are struggling with the same issues, and that until we start to think differently about our relationship with food, it was never going to end. It was just going to keep going on and on. So I'm very happy to say that I'm well beyond that, and I've had the great privilege of training many, many people and writing many books to try to help with helping others heal their relationship with food and their bodies too.
Right. Wow. What a story, and such a opportunity to be able to use your story to help others. I mean, I find that just really encouraging that you can come and not just be a physician, but somebody who's got a real story behind what you're doing and being able to share that and encourage others. I'm wondering, what does it mean to you, the theme this year for NEDA, Come As You Are, and thinking about your history with food in your body?
Well, I love it, because I think the idea of Come As You Are is really about understanding that we are all imperfect and that we are all in process and that we're in different places on this journey, but we are all welcome on this journey. I mean, this journey to heal our relationship with food in our body, I think for many people is the door opener. When people are able to put eating into its proper place in their life, it frees up so much energy for them to truly go out and live their lives fully and share their gifts or discover what those gifts are, and use the life that they've been given in a way that's so much more productive and important than weighing, measuring, counting, and logging food. And so I think, wherever you are in this journey, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think back to some of the conversations we've had and about weight, and how like this journey really isn't about the weight. What could you say to the people listening to help kind of remove that stigma for them of it being about the weight and help them move more into that body respect and health at every size kind of philosophy that we adhere to?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I will be the first to admit that when I started this work, I didn't realize that weight wasn't the problem. Originally started this kind of journey thinking, okay, well, this will help me finally reach, whatever. And really what I believe with all my heart is that this constant seeking to change our bodies and this constant aspiration toward the thin ideal is really the underpinning of many of the problems that we have in our culture around food and eating and disordered eating disorders. So I really believe that if we can relearn how to manage our eating instinctively and mindfully, we can just assume our weight is going to take care of itself and let our weight be what it's going to be. I know that sounds very scary and probably very unconventional because we live in a weight-obsessed culture. We live in diet culture. We are immersed in this idea that we're supposed to sculpt our bodies to look at like some image that we've seen on a magazine that isn't even real. And
Right.
I think really this idea that even now a lot of people are sort of recognizing the harm that's been done through that constant message. And so now we've subtly shifted to no, it's not about weight, it's about health. And we're doing the same thing. We're making some of the same mistakes in terms of promoting restrictive eating and obsessive eating with, whatever, focusing on health now. And as a physician, I'm all about health and well-being, but my definition of what it really takes to be healthy is much broader than it once was. And I really am passionate about helping other people think about themselves in terms of their overall well-being. And you simply cannot measure that on a scale.
No, definitely not. I'm glad to hear that part of, like you being a physician, because I do think that's a really unique piece that you have, coming from that medical background. And I know that many of the women and men that I encounter who might have larger bodies, there's so much shame and guilt around so much of that, just their body alone, much less their eating habits. And so they fear going to the doctor or they fear getting on that scale. What would you say to those folks who maybe, regardless of size and the fear that they might have in approaching their physician and talking about health at every size, like through that lens versus a weight lens? How would you encourage them to maybe approach that?
Well, I think anticipating those conversations can be very helpful. And there's certainly been a lot written about how to have those conversations. I think it's very important for you to own your own experience and to know that you have a right to ask for care that is respectful of the body that you're in. And so if you are ever treated in a way that is disrespectful or shaming by a nurse or a medical assistant or a physician, you have every right to stand up for your rights, say what you believe, ask for better treatment. And if none of those are comfortable for you, find another practice. Go somewhere else where you will be treated with respect and given the care that you deserve in the body that you have.
Absolutely. That's such good encouragement. Thinking about the binge eating, because that's often when I think of Come As You Are, that's a population that I feel like is really underserved and they're missed a lot because of the shame and guilt there. What is binge eating? What does that look like typically? And what are some ways that people could move into maybe kind of removing that shame so they can step into receiving the help that they deserve?
Well, I think first of all, it's very important to emphasize that not all people who binge eat are in larger bodies, and not all people who are in larger bodies binge eat. I mean,
Absolutely.
those two things are often conflated, and they are not one and the same. Binge eating, as you well know, binge eating disorder is an eating disorder. It was added to the DSM in 2013. And so it is a recognizable and treatable eating disorder. In the simplest sense, it is when people binge eat, which is eating a larger amount of food than most people would eat under similar circumstances repeatedly. So oftentimes the things that, don't get talked about so much is one of the things you've already mentioned, which is the incredible amount of shame associated with this eating disorder. And I think the other thing, and it's not part of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, but it's something that many of us see clinically, and that is that binge eating is often associated with a phase of restrictive eating as well. And I think that's one of the things that really creates a real sense of frustration and confusion for people who struggle with binge eating disorder, is that they can be really good on their diet for a period of time and then swing in completely the opposite direction and feel that they've really completely lost control. And so that's a very scary and discouraging cycle to be caught in. And so that's why it's so important that if you're struggling with binge eating disorder, that you seek help from a qualified therapist, dietitian if necessary, but really to get help, because at least in our experience, the work that I've done with Dr. Carrie Anderson, and we have done research on this, and mindful eating can literally transform a person's life. They will move from severe binging to non-binging through this process of learning to allow all foods into their diet, use hunger and satiety cues, and most importantly, learn other ways of meeting their needs in addition to eating. Because ultimately, food doesn't meet those other needs very well. And so when we're struggling with binge eating disorder, it's not about the weight. It's not even about the food. It's about the fact that we have these needs and these triggers and these emotions and these thoughts that we're just like any human being trying to deal with. And through the process of mindful eating, we can learn how to meet those needs in more effective ways, so that food can then become a joyful part of our life instead of a love-hate relationship.
I go back to thinking about that restriction, because you're right. I think a lot of people make that assumption that in binge eating, that's all that these people are ever doing is binge eating. But I love in your books and the work that you do, that cycle that you describe of eat, repent, repeat. And that swing that you've got going, and the goal that you've got in those mindful eating programs is to get closer to that middle and hitting those extremes less often.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that is great too. It's like, not to say that they're completely off limits. So it's like the person is really in charge of what's happening. And instead of hitting the eat or the repent cycle end of it, you're coming back here to that more normalized or instinctive eating.
Right. And to your point, so to expand on that a little bit, when I'm talking about this, I describe the yo-yo dieting, the term we've used already to describe what happens for many people who eat restrictively. So a yo-yo is either up or it's down. And, you're either headed on your diet or you're headed off your diet. There's really no in between in that pattern. And so if we can think instead of a pendulum, like you've been describing, where, yeah, you might sometimes overeat, you might sometimes, eat really healthy or whatever. I mean, there are going to be swings in the pendulum, but a pendulum does have a middle. And so what mindfulness and mindful eating teaches us how to do is find a smaller arc between those extremes. That arc is going to be different from one person to the next, and it's going to be different at different times in your life, or even in your month or your year. It's flexible. It's a very flexible approach. But the point is that instead of swinging wildly from being in control, out of control, in control, out of control, there's an arc in the middle where you're in charge. When you're in charge, you're aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your external or environmental triggers. You're aware of what's happening, and then you make the decision that's right for you in that moment. It hasn't been predetermined by some diet rule book or, by some rule book that you have installed in your own mind from every other diet you've ever been on. It's literally about being in charge of the decisions you make moment to moment. And sometimes that decision might be to have the candy bar. And that's perfectly okay. There's no making up for it. There's no guilt. There's no burning it off later. It's just food, right? And when we take the power away from food, we can then be in charge of our decisions. I like to say that when guilt is no longer a factor, common sense will prevail. And again, that's presuming that if you have binge eating disorder, you're also learning and working with a therapist or a dietitian to help you understand, what food is doing in your life and how to meet those needs in better ways.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So when you're talking about that middle ground and hitting that, more common ground more often, that's really where that mindful eating piece comes in. Tell me more about the work that you've done with mindful eating and kind of describe that to the audience.
Well, my favorite, and I'm going to pause here for a second, Kelly, because what I would love to do, I'd love to talk about this some more, but I'm really an experiential learner and I like to teach from experience. So for this session, if we could, after we've talked a little bit more, I'd love to guide everyone through a mindful eating experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you plan to participate, if you have just a little snack, maybe whatever, it could be a piece of fruit, it could be a piece of chocolate, it could be, the first part of your lunch, whatever works for you, have that nearby, but put it out of sight if you would, because I think a lot of us who have struggled with food are food suggestible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see food, we're thinking about food, or we might unconsciously begin to nibble at it. And so having it out of your line of vision so you can focus on this conversation will help you. And then when it's time to eat, then we focus as fully as we can on the food.
Great.
So, yeah, so I'd love to do that if we'll try to leave enough time here that we can just do a couple mindful bites together.
Definitely.
So my favorite definition of mindful eating is eating with intention and attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so intention and attention, which is basically purpose and awareness. And so as we think about maybe this small snack that we're going to do mindfully here together in a few moments, what might the intention be? Maybe to get a little fuel or nourishment or vitamins or pleasure, which is a perfectly legitimate reason for eating. And in fact, food is often pleasurable. And I'm actually, when it's not, I try to shift to something else, because why eat something that isn't fantastic when there are so many other options?
Right.
So knowing what our reason is, our intention for eating is very helpful. My personal favorite intention is to feel better when I'm done eating than I did when I started.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to feel good when I'm done. When I used to do a lot of the binging and restricting and the eat, repent, repeat cycle, oftentimes I did not feel better after eating. If I underate because I was on some diet plan, I still felt hungry. Maybe I didn't have energy. Maybe I felt deprived. I was still thinking about what I really wanted to eat and didn't get to. When I was overeating and eating mindlessly or for emotional reasons, and I would eat too much, then I would feel overly full and uncomfortable after eating. And of course, that doesn't feel good either. So being in charge is really about deciding, I want to feel good. I want to feel better when I'm done eating. So if I'm hungry when I start, maybe I'm a little uncomfortable, my stomach is growling, I don't have energy, I can't focus as well. And then when I eat something I really enjoy, I get the pleasure from that. And when I'm done eating, I feel energetic and ready to go with my next activity. So that's a great intention for me. Now, do I always do that? No, of course not. You see, part of this process of learning to eat mindfully, at least for me and many of the people that I worked with, is learning to be more flexible and learning to understand that it's not, one way or the other, but there's a lot of middle ground there, right? And then eating with attention will get us to our mindful eating experience here. But attention is really just your full awareness, not just on the food, but also on your body and your experience of the food. And so eating with attention helps us stay tuned in. So eating becomes more of an inside out experience, whereas many of us have been for so long an outside in. How many calories, how many carbs, how many grams, how many points? It's, all about data instead of truly experiencing the food. The more I experience the food in my body, the more deeply satisfied I am with my meal, and the more I learn from any feedback that I get after eating. Do you want to do the experience now, or you want to chat a little longer?
Let's go ahead and do the experience, because I really want to make sure that we get that to the audience, because many people have no idea how to be with food and be present with it and have that mindfulness with it. So to give them that gift right now, I think would be amazing.
Fantastic. And I want to say before we do this, that some people, when they think about mindful eating, really all they think about is tasting and savoring and smelling their food, eating slowly, turning off the TV. And I want to say that that's part of mindful eating. But from the way that I really look at it, it's only one part of mindful eating. I think mindful eating is really experiencing the entire decision-making process around eating, beginning with, why am I eating in the first place? Am I hungry? What am I hungry for? How much do I eat? How do I feel afterwards? So I think there's a much broader way that we can look at mindful eating that's much more helpful. And it's certainly what we use in our programs and retreats to help people really heal their relationship with food.
Absolutely.
So if you brought food, go ahead and bring it out now, and just first have a little feast for the eyes. So just take a moment to experience your food visually, noticing maybe if it's wrapped, noticing how it's wrapped, maybe why. I mean, oftentimes, for example, chocolate will be wrapped in gold foil or made to look like a little present, a little gift. And of course, that has an effect on the way we value that kind of food. If it's a piece of fruit, maybe you spend a little time noticing the seeds or the segments, and really take a look at that, because I think sometimes we forget that food and eating is really a multi-sensory experience. All right, now that you've looked at your food, let's get ourselves centered by just taking a couple of deep breaths. And what this will do is it will bring you into the present moment, the only moment you can actually fully experience, and it will calm the nervous system. Because when we're taking a few deep breaths, it says to the brain that all is well, that I'm not running away from a predator, there's no one's going to steal my food, nothing bad is going to happen here. And that calms the nervous system and puts us in a more receptive state to enjoy our food. Notice the feeling of calmness that you get just with a couple of deep breaths. Now set your intention for these bites that we're going to take together. What is your intention for eating? Is this because you are hungry and you need fuel? Did you choose a snack that you thought would be particularly nourishing? Are you looking for pleasure at this moment? Are you wanting to feel better? Or maybe you just want to learn. Maybe your experience here is all about learning about mindful eating. Whatever your intention is perfectly fine. Just select one or two. And now as you look at your food again, decide what you are most interested in tasting first. This is particularly helpful when you have a plate of food and lots of things to choose from. My mother used to tell me that I needed to eat my vegetables first, but the problem with that is that by the time I would get to what I really wanted, I would be too full and maybe not as interested, but I'd eat it anyway, right? So my suggestion is, as you look at the food, make a conscious decision about what part of that food looks the most appetizing and what do you want to taste first. And then go ahead and begin to bring the bite of food up to your nose where you can smell it. This is a really important part of mindful eating, because much of what we experience, we describe as taste, is actually from the aromas of the food. It's the aromas and the taste sensations on our tongue that give us flavor. So just see. And now the other thing that's interesting about aromas is they often conjure up memories or other emotional connections. So just notice whether anything popped into your mind. Also notice if there's any part of you that is feeling terribly anxious and really wanting to rush this process and get this over with. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't shame yourself for that, but it's an opportunity to notice how our relationship with food has become. That urgency to eat it right now is sort of that sense that we get when we don't trust that we're going to be able to eat when we're hungry or enjoy or be allowed to enjoy food. And so just again, return to those calming breaths if you need to. All right, now go ahead and bring your food up to your mouth. Take another little sniff there and take a small bite and just let it land on your tongue and pause for a moment. So feel the food on your tongue. Notice temperature, texture. You might become aware of taste. For example, the tongue can detect salty, sweet, bitter, a newer flavor called umami, which means savory or deliciousness, and of course sour. So just notice the taste profile of the food that you have in your mouth. If you're ready, go ahead and start to slowly chew that. Notice whether chewing it changes the flavor. It certainly will change the texture. And notice that as you're chewing, you continue to breathe slowly and bring the aromas back up into the nasopharynx, the back of your nose, because that's where those aromas will mix with the taste and create the flavors that you're experiencing. When our bites are too big, we can't continue to breathe while we eat and we miss that aspect of eating. When you're done with chewing that bite, go ahead and consciously swallow and pause for a few moments. You may even notice that you can still taste the food in your mouth. In wine tasting, we call this the finish, but certainly with food, we sometimes move on to the next bite of food when there's still flavor left from the last bite of food. So slowing down and pausing and enjoying the flavors that you're experiencing before you take your next bite can be very important. Again, take a look at your food. If there was something about that food that you had that you didn't enjoy, either what you chose off of your plate or maybe the only food you brought, if you didn't enjoy it, you have the option here to get something different or to set it aside and wait until you have something really enjoyable and practice again. Or you might decide, well, this is all I've got and I need to eat right now because I've got to get on with my day. And you might decide to eat it, but just know that satisfaction from eating comes not just from fullness of the stomach, but also from enjoying the food that we eat. And so it's really important that you're conscious of how you're selecting your food and that you're eating things that bring you pleasure, because if they don't, you're going to end up eating more in the long run anyway.
Right.
So take a look at your food again, and then bring that back up to your nose and just pause for a moment to take in the aroma before you take a small bite. And as we did before, go ahead and set your food down or your fork down. As you're practicing this mindful eating in a meal, notice whether your tendency is to start to load your next fork full of food while you have a fork full of food in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Which forkful are you paying attention to? The next one, right? And so when you get it in your mouth, you're starting to load again. So just fully focus on the tastes that are in your mouth right now, noticing sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami. Breathing gently if you can so you get those aromas, chewing whenever you're ready and ready to experience that bite in a completely different way. Swallowing when you're ready, and then just pausing. As you pause, just consider liking or disliking. There's no judgment of the food, no judgment of you, but was this something that you enjoyed? Is it something you would like to eat again, either soon or sometime in the future? Or is this an experience that you prefer not to repeat? Because we can take in a lot of feedback from our experience of eating. Sometimes, you know, we've had this fantasy about some particular food that was forbidden to us in the past, or a food that we've struggled with in the past. And when we actually eat it mindfully, we discover it's not that great. We built it up into a big deal, and it wasn't that big of a deal. And, yes, I might eat it again in the future, but my cravings for it are really unfounded. It's not that great. On the other hand, it might be that we make ourselves eat certain healthy foods, maybe a protein bar or some drink or something that really tastes quite horrible and is not enjoyable and isn't really something that we want to continue to take into our bodies, just because that it's possible to find a balance between eating for nourishment and eating for enjoyment, and that balance is much more satisfying in the long run. So I won't do any more bites now, but of course this is a recording. So if you want to finish your snack, or if you want to come back and try this again with a different food, you can replay this section here on Kelly's Facebook page and have that experience again. Mindful eating, unlike dieting, which gets harder and harder every single day, mindful eating becomes easier and more natural with practice. And so there will come a time when you will find yourself preferring to eat in this way just because it brings you more pleasure and enjoyment and satiety and satisfaction.
Wow, that's really a powerful experience. And even, I mean, I've heard this from you before and have been training with you, and there's always something new to experience from it. And I think back to the first time that I ever did this, gosh, it must have been like 8 or 9 years ago when we were at a conference together and you were leading this very same opportunity. And I remember it was a lunch, and I had like a normal lunch with, the proteins and the starch, veggies, a rounded meal. And then I had chocolate cake because I love, love, love chocolate cake. And I chose to do my mindful bite with the chocolate cake. And Michelle, I remember this cake. It was a reasonable size piece of cake. And I had some of those mindful bites, and it was just enough for me that I was satisfied with what I got from it. Because for me, it was pleasure in that moment. I remember this to the day. I can remember where I was sitting at the table. And then I went into my meal and just had so much confidence and peace and comfort with the food in front of me, knowing that I had already eaten what I truly desired for the pleasure piece of it. And it was a really helpful experience. One of the things to think about that you just mentioned was the time, like that forkful coming and being ready. I feel like we feel so much pressure, at least in the United States, to go, 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 that we have such a difficult time to just sit down and kind of go through that decision-making process with our food. So I know from personal experience, just wanting to encourage everyone out there that you don't have to get it that way every time and right out the gate. Like Michelle was saying, it's going to take some time. It takes some practice. And so give yourself grace and maybe purposely plan a specific meal during the day that you want to practice that with. And then you won't necessarily put yourself in a situation where you feel bad if you didn't get it done. Would you add anything to that, Michelle?
No, I think that's a really important point. I think this is actually very symptomatic of a lot of us who've struggled with food, is we tend to think in terms of good or bad, all or nothing, right or wrong. And I think one of the beautiful things that mindfulness has brought to my life, and that mindful eating specifically was the doorway for me, is that it allowed me to see that I didn't need to do it perfectly every time, and that there is no right way to eat in order to experience exactly what I needed from a particular meal. So if it's difficult for you, that's fine. Just be aware that it's difficult for you. Maybe it's enough to take the first bite or two of a meal mindfully, and then allow yourself to kind of relax into it, and then see how the rest of the meal compares to those first mindful bites. What happens again is as we get feedback as we do this, and we don't need some external set of rules to tell us how to do it. We just learn and we practice, and we notice what works for us. We notice what we like, what we don't like, and slowly but surely we become the experts on meeting our own needs. And if I could add one more thing, I think that how we do anything is how we do everything. And I think oftentimes this rush to eat the next bite of food is also the way that we're living our lives. When my kids, finally get into school, when my kids finally get out of school, when I finally retire, when I finally have enough money, when I finally lose these 10 or 20 or 100 pounds, whatever it is, we're constantly focused on the future and we postpone living our lives right now because we expect that someday it will be a better time. There's no better time than right now to live our lives fully and confidently and joyfully. And so the more we can practice mindfulness, not just in our eating, but in the way that we are in our relationships and our work and the things that we love to do, the more we start to find that food doesn't need to fill all those other holes for us.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I love like your tagline, eat mindfully, live vibrantly. And I think that really sums up exactly like what you're doing. A lot of what you just said was practice and giving yourself time and space. And I think about the work that you do, and you have an awesome program that allows people to practice, but also to not practice alone. And so I want to take just a moment for you to give everybody listening and watching where they can find you on the internet, whether it's your web page, the different Facebook groups. And then I'd love for you to share some more information about the new things that you have coming up with the mindful eating for binge eating.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So I'm all about helping change the way the world thinks about eating. So that's really why I'm on this planet, I think. And I really would encourage people to learn more, be curious, move away from doing it right or doing something perfectly and just learn. So a great place to start is on our website, amihungry.com. So that's amihungry.com. We have all kinds of free resources there, programs, retreats, all kinds of ways to access this information, but start somewhere, right? You'll find our social links on there too. I have a Facebook page that's quite active. I have a Twitter account that's pretty active. And so you'll find lots of inspiration there as well. I think a second step would be to check out the first chapter of Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat. That's my first book. You can actually download the first chapter for free. Let me give you that link because I think what it'll do is introduce you to how mindful eating can make a big difference in your life. So it's amihungry.com/chapter1. So the word chapter is spelled out and then it's the number 1. And you can just download that chapter and see if this makes sense to you. Learn a little bit more about your own patterns, restrictive eating, overeating, instinctive eating, and how mindful eating can help you find that balance. And then, as you mentioned, I'm really super excited about this. Dr. Carrie Anderson and I developed Mindful Eating for Binge Eating program a number of years ago. We have a book called Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat for binge eating. And we are really super excited that for the first time ever, the workbook that we created based on our research and based on the program that we've been offering for the last 5 years is now available to the public. It was never available to the public before. It was only available through certain therapists, and now anybody can get a copy of that book. I would still encourage you to work with experts like Kelly and get yourself a therapist who can help you work your way through this process of learning to unravel your relationship with food and heal your relationship with food. But at least now you have a tool that you'll be able to use as you go through that process. So if you go to amihungry.com and click on the word store up on the navigation, you'll go right to the page where you can find that book and workbook. One more thing, if I could. We have a Mindful Eating for Emotional Eating and Binge Eating retreat coming up in October. It'll be in Arizona, in Carefree, Arizona. How's that for a name, right? This little town is called Carefree, and that's exactly what we want for you is to develop a more carefree, joyful relationship with food. And so Carrie and I will both be there teaching and learning and having a great time. So I hope you'll check that out. You'll find that on our website too.
I forgot to mention this at the beginning, and I'll make sure that when we go live with this to bring this up. But everybody who's watching and commenting and participating throughout the day, whether you're watching it live or later in the day, as you're commenting and responding to Michelle, she's going to be on live with us too, but she has graciously given us a copy of her book and workbook to give away to a random winner. So make sure that you're participating in the comments. Ask Michelle questions because she will be live the day this recording is going. And we want you to be able to just kind of experience that wealth of information by giving you that free gift. And Michelle, I really thank you for your generosity with that and offering that. And we're really excited that everybody can have access to the workbook. And I agree with you, of course, that workbooks aren't enough by themselves to still have that team around you supporting you and encouraging you along the way. So thank you so much, Michelle, for that offering.
You're very welcome, Kelly. I'm excited that you'll be working with people and helping, and I'm so glad to be a part of this.
Michelle, are there any last parting words that you would like to give the audience?
Well, I just want to echo, come as you are. Wherever you are in this journey is perfectly fine. It is a journey, and it'll continue to change. So whatever your needs are, there's somebody out there, there's a tool, there's a resource out there that can help you. So it's time. Live your big, vibrant life.
Awesome. Michelle, thank you so much.
You're welcome.